Can everyone hear me? Excellent. Okay. Very tough to follow. This is also my first lecture at QUT. Thanks for having me. But it's also my first lecture. Oh, yes?
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think you might want to split the screens.
Okay.
Not your notes, but your...
Is there a way to do it differently?
Just switch screens, it should say something.
Yeah. It's the top left of the...
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Then I won't have my notes. I might just grab my laptop if that's okay. Because I did type my notes and I didn't print them because I'm old school. New school, yeah. Sorry. Okay. Yes, I have not lectured. I'm not an academic. I'm not a professor. I apologise. I am what you would call a policy wonk. Background environmental science, have moved into the renewable energy space, formerly in mining and coal seam gas. I apologise, Professor Christoph. But yes, they don't let us out very often, us policy wonks, but I'm very, very pleased to be here today. My name is Hannah Gardiner, and I'm the Assistant Director for Renewables Policy for the Queensland Renewable Energy Council. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today, the Yagara and Turrbal people, as the first peoples of this country. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that appreciation and acknowledgement to any First Nations people present in the room today. I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. These lands always were and always will be First Nations lands. And I recognise their deep and continuous connection to the country, including the lands, waters and skies, and the role in caring for country over thousands of generations. It is the lands, the waters and the skies that allow our renewable energy sector to thrive. So who's the Queensland Renewable Energy Council? Well, we were the first state-based association established in Australia for renewable energy development. We're just a little bit over 2 years old, and the reason we started up, our Chief Executive, Katie Ann Mulder, saw that we were growing at a scale and pace of renewable energy development across Queensland in a very fragmented policy framework. And what we needed was to streamline that policy and to engage with the Queensland government and the local government. Queensland's a very unique place, very large state, 77 local government areas, and everything needed to be brought together. There were some leading practice organisations doing well. Communities were often being left behind, though. They felt like they did not have a voice. They wanted to be part of the renewable energy transition and not have the transition done to them. So what we do is we work with industry, we work with communities, we work with all levels of government in a bipartisan way to deliver a sustainable renewable energy sector for Queensland. So we support good policies, not parties, and working with both state and local government in a bipartisan way. We have a deep focus on the how for the policy, engaging with landholders, the community, agricultural groups and environmental groups as well. And what we do is we represent the industry collectively. We don't represent individual projects. So just a bit about policy priorities that we focus on, and again, we're a little over 2 years old. It goes into industry support and government relations. So we comment on bills that are before Parliament and coming into Act. We developed growth and investment strategies. We've developed biosecurity frameworks, leading practice investment and developer toolkits when it comes to landholder engagement for developers. We work on coexistence and social licence. Sustainability and First Nations inclusion is a really big piece and at the heart of what QREC does. And a lot of workforce and infrastructure related work, especially when it comes to the transport and logistics matters for oversized overmass wind farm components. So this is just a bit of an overview of our members. You can see the top half are the energy developers that we represent across Queensland. And then the bottom is what we would call our associate members. Those are the companies that have a vested interest in the renewable energy rollout. strong ESG frameworks and governance and want to see real climate change mitigation and adaptation. So what I wanted to start off with is a bit of a very high level, rough as guts view of what the planning framework looks like. Not sure how much you would know what changed recently under the planning framework, but as I said, we started up because it was very fragmented. So wind farms and solar farms used to be assessed either code or impact assessable under the planning framework. Wind farms had a code, but solar farms did not, and it was dependent on each local government planning scheme to decide how those projects were assessed. This was a lot of uncertainty for investors and developers, and also the communities as well. And so we were pushing for a streamlined policy reform. Now, when the new government came in, the Deputy Premier and Minister for Planning announced in his ministerial charter letter that he was going to reform the policy surrounding wind and solar farms. You beauty, that sounds great. Would love to be involved. Unfortunately, what happened was unexpected changes to the wind farm code happened in February, making them impact accessible with mandatory community consultation and stricter decommissioning requirements. Now, that's not to say that those weren't needed, they certainly were. But what the issue was is there was no community nor industry consultation on those reforms. They were announced unexpectedly. Several wind farm projects at that point were called in or put on pause by the project. And then later on in May, what happened is both wind farms and solar farms became impact accessible under the planning framework. Now, the really interesting part is before a project can lodge its development assessment, it has to go and negotiate with the local government, do a social impact assessment with the community, and enter into a commercial agreement with the local government where it will pay a local government financial contributions on an annual basis. And it has to enter into that commercial agreement before it can even lodge its development application. So what we're seeing is a lot of angst from investors who have headquarters overseas, especially in Europe, where this is conflicting with their anti-bribery and anti-corruption policies. And so we're seeing a little bit of angst as to the process by which this is happening. So typically an approval process would take between 3 and 6 months from application to approval, but depending on how long it takes for you to negotiate your community benefit agreement, it could be longer. And then the information request component, that also takes time. Under the planning framework, there's also the public notification period. So any submitters can object or appeal the project, and that can be held up in the Planning and Environment Court. So again, we're seeing additional barriers for renewable energy development, which could hinder the rollout of the much needed renewable energy transformation for our sector. So for battery energy storage systems, it's a little bit, it looks simpler, but it's not. It's fragmented and a bit confusing. So it is also assessed under the Planning Act. It's considered on a case-by-case basis by the local government. So they do have the opportunity to refer it to the Department of Planning for consideration, but really it's up to each local government to assess the project based on their local planning policies. So they're submitted to the assessment manager, referral to the agencies, information request decisions, again, 3 to 6 months. However, please watch this space. So we understand the Department of Development, State Development, Infrastructure and Planning is now reviewing how battery energy storage systems are assessed under the planning framework. Assume that it's going to come anytime soon. And what we do anticipate is that they'll potentially look at bringing them into the community benefit agreement and social impact assessment process. So it does need reform. That's a no-brainer. The reason it needs reform is because we have 77 local government areas across Queensland. Having assessment by each local government is very confusing and complex for developers. It is for the communities as well. So what this means is that we have recommended that it should be code accessible with the State Assessment Referral Agency as the assessment manager. This would mean the development of a planning code under the state development assessment provisions as well, and we would want that drafted in consultation with industry. And then local governments should also have a formal agency advice role on that too. So the reason that we do want to see a change in this is this inconsistency across all these different local governments is increasing the financial risk for investors, and it hinders the timely deployment of critical grid infrastructure. So this leads into, I guess, the energy system trends and why we need more batteries and storage. So you may all be familiar with the duck curve. If not, let me introduce you to the duck curve. So 2015 is the orange line, 2020 is light blue, and dark blue is 2025. And it's essentially the supply and demand across Queensland's energy system on any given day. So you see that really in 2015, if we go back about 10 years, it peaks, it drops during the nighttime when everyone's asleep. So down here, it's its lowest, and then it ramps up in the morning. People start waking up, having their coffees, going to work. During the day, and this is when, the system didn't have a lot of renewable energy, it would peak while we were doing our work, and then it would come up again at night when we were coming home, turning on our appliances, cooking dinner, doing our washing, before we would go to bed, and then it would peak down again around 9 p.m. Come to 2020, we see a bit more renewable energy coming into the system. So what that means is you're getting the flatness underneath the curve at nighttime as well. Then more solar rooftops started coming online. And so you can see the dip below here is lower than what the orange was in 2015. But then there was still the peak that was coming up, a bit higher, as the orange, due to the increase in population, and that's continuous rapid population growth. Now we come to 2025, we are a sunshine state, we have a lot of solar rooftop. We've got a rollout of renewable energy projects across Queensland. So during the day, we have got a surplus of energy, a lot of supply, not a lot of demand. And so what that means is the duck's belly is quite low, and then at night time. So what we need to do is shift the energy that we've got here that is wasted potential energy and move it to the night time so that we're flattening the curve. So essentially BESS and pumped hydro are the key to this. They shift the energy to when you need it most, which is in the evening. And so as you can see, the duck curve is becoming more pronounced. Generation infrastructure is increasingly built with co-located battery as well, and so we think we can see that more across Queensland. In the other part of the BESS planning framework, we want the approvals to align with the scale and pace needed for grid firming. So you can see the cost, and I see we've chosen some very similar people to reference today. So Paul Simsaza did his State of the Network presentation recently, and you can see the cost of lithium-ion battery prices has significantly reduced over the last decade or so, or 15 years. So I think that's roughly 90%. And so this just makes it more efficient and easily cost beneficial for investors to make decisions to install their battery energy storage systems and standalone BESS facilities. So having those batteries in place keeps the electricity low for Queensland households and for businesses. It reduces the need for coal and gas ramping during peak demand, and it also helps prevent frequency and fault level issues. So we are the biggest in the world when it comes to rooftop solar uptake, so 53.7%, and we'll probably see that continue to grow. So by implementing more BESS and pumped hydro, we'll be able to shift that energy, and then that also helps take the load off renewable energy, which is curtailed during the day and typically has negative prices. So what does the future of our energy system look like? If we have a look at this chart here, which is installed capacity, and this is from AEMO's 2024 Integrated System Plan, you can see the black here is black coal. So come 2033-34, we're not going to see much more black coal in terms of installed new capacity. And what we will see, and you can see with the distributed PV, which is your rooftop solar, that's the top colour here, a lot more of that, as well as utility solar, and then the green is the wind. So renewables are essentially the future. That's where we're going. The Gen Cost report for the last 3 or 4 years that's undertaken by CSIRO consistently says that onshore solar and wind is the lowest levelised cost of electricity for greenfield energy generation, and that's for new builds. So it's quite a no-brainer. Queensland, we are one of the most volatile energy market systems in the world, but we have rooftop solar, which can help us dominate and lead the way as a powerhouse. The other challenge is that we are electrifying a lot of our system as well, not just for heavy industries like mining companies that need to decarbonise, other industries like aluminium refinery and smelting up in Gladstone, but people are buying more EVs. And so the electrification of other appliances and other industries means that there's going to be more demand in the market, which means we need more generation. So the big question we get often asked is the system market or policy driven? And I guess it's a bit of both, but what we can see is that it's mainly been market led so far. So this is also from Simshouse's Gilmore's counterfactual scenario. Highly recommend reading that paper for anyone that does want to have a gaze at it. It's exceptional. Paul, the outgoing CEO of Powerlink, is very excellent when it comes to putting all the figures together. And what I've done is just overlapped a few policy announcements to show that despite the fact that we've had a few announcements in whether it's regulatory policy or renewable investment, the renewable energy share in the market, it's pretty much a stable increase, and it's been steadily increasing. So, for example, within Queensland, we had the Queensland Energy and Jobs Plan, the Queensland Supergrid Infrastructure Blueprint, that was in 2022. It wasn't until 2024 that we actually legislated our renewable energy targets and emissions reduction targets in Queensland. And then we also released the renewable energy zone roadmaps. So whilst the latter bars are a forecast, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I'll talk to that in a little bit. So if we talk about the pipeline of Queensland's projects, we can see that there is a lot of onshore wind and solar and battery. Probably not a lot of coal and gas, and quite a bit of pumped hydro. So this is from Rystad Energy's research and analysis. Very interesting. So the orange is operating, the yellow is construction, financial close is the green, and then for application and concept is the lighter green and the blue. So there's about 140 gigawatts that's in the pipeline for Queensland at the stage. So on the 10th of October, the Treasurer and Minister for Energy, David Janetsky, announced his energy roadmap. And we get asked, as a renewable energy peak body, what were our thoughts? And if I'm being honest, it's probably the best that we could have hoped for under the current government. It's very disappointing that the renewable energy targets were being repealed. Having said that, there are clear signals in there for a strong framework that does talk about investor-led renewable energy market. It does talk about the fact that the coal-fired power stations will go offline. We know that they're aging facilities, and they will keep them on as long as they are technically and commercially viable, with the last one running up till 2046. But what it does allow with the decision matrix and with the system outlook is that if enough renewable energy installment comes online, they will review those closure dates. So really, it's up to, I guess, where the installment comes. But having said that, there are a lot of signals in here that I guess we need more energy. We need 6.8 gigawatts of new solar and wind by 2030. This will be led by private investment. So in line with this, and on a related note, prior to the launch of the energy roadmap, we put together something called a renewable energy growth and investment strategy. And what this was a plan to turn that 140 gigawatts of renewable energy pipeline into real jobs and investment and real projects. It's built on 15 practical applications across 3 pillars, which is refocusing the energy system for long-term reliability and affordability, partnering with regional Queensland, and creating a world-class development framework. So in line with the Queensland Government's energy roadmap, our strategy outlines how Queensland can attract private capital while strengthening local communities and securing our place as a global energy leader. So I'll not talk about all 15 recommendations. I would encourage you to read the document itself. I've got one here. It's available on our website as well. But some of the key ones that we wanted to do was talk about a clear long-term strategy for transitioning. We called for the dates of closure for the coal-fired power stations. We partially got that with the energy roadmap. They're going to do a system outlook every 2 years, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. We wanted the renewable energy zones to focus on transmission coordination. They're now going to be moved to regional energy hubs, and so we see some strong alignment with what we think would be better for transmission coordination. There needs to be targeted support for pumped hydro as well. We don't have enough pumped hydro. We need to roll out more of those. We need to understand where the best sites are. We'd also like to see one of the toolkits that we developed led into a mandatory code of conduct, which will just lift the industry experience when it comes to engaging with landholders, communities, and First Nations people as well. An integrated energy and agriculture plan. So this morning I was at a breakfast with the Premier where he talked about on National Ag Day the fact that there is a 2025 agricultural blueprint where they want to spend $30 billion on the agricultural sector by 2030. There are huge synergies between renewables and agriculture. We're a coexisting industry. We drought-proof a lot of farms. We help them optimise their operations. They electrify their operations. And there have been case studies where they've actually achieved productivity increases on their food and fibre by hosting renewable energy as well. And the other one I wanted to point out was strengthening the role of First Nation groups in the transition to clean energy. So we are a signatory to the First Nations Clean Energy Strategy. Our minister signed it last year on the 6th of December at the Energy Ministerial Council meeting. But the concern is that a lot of our legislation in Queensland does not speak to the role of First Nations people. So see, these are some of the other recommendations. Would welcome you to take a look at them, but I won't go into too much detail. But what I did want to talk about is the communities at the heart of the transformation, and that's just underpinned by the Renewable Energy Developer and Investor Toolkit that we released in May. And it talks about the role that local governments will play as central partners in planning and engagement. So after the reforms in May, there's now been 4 local governments that have released community benefit agreement policies. And that basically says you need to pay a dollar amount per megawatt per year for your project. And that money comes to us as local government, and then we distribute it aligned with our local priorities. Now, there's a couple of red flags depending on which local government you speak to and how progressive they are and how advanced they are with working with renewable energy companies. But what we're concerned about is how much will the community be consulted as to how that money is spent? Are we actually making lasting legacy and meaningful benefits for local communities? And that's where the real focus should be. So it needs broader place-based approaches to assessing the social impacts and community benefit planning rather than the project-by-project space. We have a lot of land use complexity as well when it comes to the renewable energy sector. So when we talk about policy stability and how renewable energy needs to plan ahead to develop a project, this is a snapshot. We recently met with North Burnett Regional Council just to show them what the overlapping planning framework looks like and the regulatory sort of hurdles that we have to navigate before we can even get a project to come up. So the pink are sort of your exploration permits, and then there's purple is your mineral development licenses, and then the green are environmental protection areas, and then I believe the others are strategic cropping land as well. So as you can see, there's not a lot of space where you can just slap on a project and not trigger some sort of policy framework that you need to navigate. And so this is something that we need to work with when it comes to engaging with landholders and farmers and the resources sector as well. So the resources have a priority right of access to private land and its private developments. So what we want to see is that partnership become stronger. Spoke a little bit about community benefit agreements, and I think the biggest piece for us is that these really must be place-based and aligned with local priorities. It needs to ensure that the project itself is sited well within the region. And it's important to consider what the needs of the communities are as well. So does this mean that your communities want an energy bill subsidy? Does it mean that they want their infrastructure upgraded? Does it mean that they just want grants? Do they want, local sporting team support? Do they want help with their aged care facilities? Do they want their RSL upgraded? The important part is that making sure those community benefit agreements go to what the community needs and what's aligned with their local priorities. Now, this is a big piece as well. We talk about the jobs when it comes to the energy transformation. We're going to require a very skilled workforce and a new talent pipeline. So we know that there are a lot of barriers, and I just want to make a mention, Aaron Johnston, who is here today, our former Queensland Renewable Energy Jobs Advocate, did an incredible role in identifying a lot of the barriers for our industry as well. And what they identified was we've got some shortages when it comes to trade specialists, especially electrical specialists, which is going to be critical for our industry. If you think about a wind turbine, not only do you need the electrical certifications and qualifications, you need to be able to work at heights. If you're doing maintenance work in a nacelle, which is the housing at the top of the wind turbine, you need a working in confined space permit. We need project managers, we need engineers, we need a construction workforce as well. Now, if we think about, we've got the 2032 Olympics coming up, we're going to be competing with the construction workforce and skilled people for that as well. But the other issue is that a lot of the projects are based in the regions. We're competing with mining, with gas, and with other communities where there's not a lot of skilled available workers. And we know that the regions that are going to be affected a lot are those with coal-fired power station workforces. So when those facilities eventually go offline, what happens to those workers? Can we transition them into new emerging jobs? And obviously one of the roles that things that we recommended was that the QREJ role should be reinstated, which was unfortunately repealed under the Queensland the Energy Roadmap Amendment Bill, which was recently tabled. So what I wanted to finish on was just what does policy certainty look like? So I talked a bit about the unexpected reforms at the start of the year to wind and solar projects and the fact that the battery reforms are coming up soon. There hasn't been a lot of consultation with industry. So what we would like to see is robust policy reform consultation. A lot of the time, the people that are developing the policy in the ministerial offices or in the departments, there's not a lot of understanding as what the operationalising of the legislation looks like. And that's why it's so important to engage with people like peak bodies and with industry and with community groups. We need clear and adequate transitional provisions as well. If I think to the wind farm changes, all the projects that were currently going through the approval process had to go back to square one. That is not a clear transitional provision. So that's a retrospective decision. And then there was also a decision recently for a wind farm called Moonlight Range, has an approval to go forward. The decision was actually made by the existing LNP government, but then that decision was rejected. So it doesn't make sense. If you've got an approval for your project, it shouldn't be repealed. So if we can get all those three things right and a few more things, we should hopefully see continued renewable energy investment in Queensland. Thank you very much.